Hello, everyone, and welcome to this annual Women in Theology and Ministry presentation, My Madonna Cries, Black Theology, Grief, and Resurrection Hope. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Amey Victoria Adkins-Jones is Assistant Professor of Theology and Africana Studies at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University. A graduate of the University of Virginia and Duke Divinity School, she received her PhD in religion from Duke University in 2016 with a certificate in feminist theory. She was the first Black woman to graduate from the doctoral program in Christian theology and ethics. Prior to joining the faculty at Emory, she worked as assistant professor in the theology department and African Diaspora Studies program here at Boston College. Her first book, Immaculate Misconceptions, A Black Mariology, centers the Black Madonna to examine how Christian theologies of purity influence who and what we deem to be sacred. She is at work on a second book project, See No Evil, which explores how visual technologies and AI impact public perception of violence and Black death. Outside of academia, Reverend Dr. Adkins-Jones is an ordained Baptist minister who frequently preaches around the country and brings pastoral sensibility to her work centering social justice. She's a wonderful colleague and scholar, and we're delighted to welcome her back to Boston College to speak with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Adkins-Jones.
Hello, everyone. It is so good to see you. Oh, hi. Okay. And it's good to come back to a place and be home. So I feel like I am among so many wonderful neighbors, colleagues, and friends. Megan generously reminded me that I did one of these during the COVID era on Zoom, and I had a terrible coughing fit in the midst, nothing demonic, just something stuck. And my lovely spouse ran from upstairs. He was watching online and brought me hot tea. And so, just to reiterate what Cara said, these things do live online for quite some time. And I am hoping to not have a repeat. But it is wonderful to see you. And before I begin, I just want to express my sincere gratitude to be able to be here. I always am so grateful to a God whose goodness finds me in manifold witness, and to Megan De Dios for the gracious invitation and coordination and tea reminder, to Cara Sullivan for wonderful logistics and hospitality, to Dean McCarthy and all of the many wonderful faculty and friends here at the CSTM, and of course to Andrea Vicini and all of my many, many wonderful faculty, staff, and student colleagues from the theology department, as well as beloved friends and family from the African and African Diaspora Studies program. It is wonderful to be back. And while I miss each of you, I don't miss this weather. But I promise you, I am very much enjoying sharing the joy of our Jesuit values alongside the Wesleyan quadrilateral. So in this moment, in the life of the world, I've been thinking so much about grief and compassion and empathy and erasure and refusal. And all of these as political acts and as theological acts and as enactments of faith. So today, I hope and invite you together with me that we may find space to grieve, to hope, to hurt, to heal, and to press. Tonight, I will be presenting some work that is inside of, but also expands and bridges some of the conversations found in Immaculate Misconceptions, as well as in See No Evil, and a lecture entitled My Madonna Cries, Black Theology, Grief, and Resurrection Hope. If you note the screen, what you see here in the background is footage shot from the funeral and viewing of Emmett Till at Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ in Chicago, Illinois. Following his mother, Mamie Till Mobley's demand for an open casket viewing to show the brutalities of his torture and lynching, thousands attended the funeral, and the viewing took place from September 3rd to September 6th, 1955. According to some who have documentary witness and were there, they guesstimated that 1 in 5 people had to be escorted and assisted out of the building, whether from fainting or completely breaking down in the overwhelming wash of sheer grief. And so here is my invocation and an ever-present reminder. Even in death, we still birth. I've taken to opening a number of my lectures with a quote to ground us from Valerie Castile, mother of Philando Castile, who was murdered at a Minnesota traffic stop by a police officer in July 2016. For years, I've cried for other women's children. For years, I've cried for other women's children. Crick, crack. Edwidge Danticat's 1995 story collection, entitled by the Haitian Creole Call and Response, to signal one's being prepared and ready to listen, one having eyes to see, one's ears ready to hear, includes one of my favorite short stories, 1937. The first sentence of which reads, "My Madonna cried." It is the story of a young girl, Josephine, who first notes that, quote, "A miniature teardrop traveled down her white porcelain face, like dew on the tip of early morning grass. When I saw the tear, I thought surely that my mother had died." This Madonna that Josephine carries is one of the few memories that remains in her family, a statue passed down through generations of legacy. Quote, "Ever since it was given to my great-great-great-grandmother, Défilé, by a Frenchman who had kept her as a slave." What a vestige of violence. Josephine has the Madonna because it was her mother who is now imprisoned in a death camp for witches, for loup-garou, for women believed to grow wings and fly in the night and take the lives of innocent children. There is no trial or defense for the accusation of being a witch, only the death sentence, the speculations of one's loose skin being signs of demonic transformation, and the story of how Josephine's mother, before these moments, jumped into the river of massacre filled with blood while she was pregnant with her, and had to watch her mother, Josephine's grandmother, be slaughtered before her very eyes on the shores of the Dominican. It reminds me of the spiritual, "Were you there?" I won't defile the story with too much summary, but the legacy of traumatized begetting, of death and birth and rebirth, of layers of irreparable and irreconcilable oppressions, is held together in this Madonna. A Madonna with white skin, but perhaps who now, through legacy, through lineage, become Haitian, is also a Black Madonna, who carries the memories of the matrilineal, who carries the grief of a broken and unfair world, and who, Josephine's mother, has learned the magic of being able to make cry. It's a porcelain Madonna who sheds one perfect tear. Josephine goes to visit her mother in what is so inhumane it can barely be called a prison, and her mother asks, "Has she cried?" I nodded, raising my index finger to show that the Madonna had cried a single tear. She pressed the statue against her chest as if to reward the Madonna, and then suddenly broke down and began sobbing herself. 2, a reading from one of my most felt vignettes in the book. Mama, 2 syllables bilabial nasal, lips pursed in smooth vibration, pushing air through the nose. My infant child lingers with furrowed brow, puckered sound that requires the fullness of her face, every muscle guiding her mouth, a sputtering with force and dexterity as she attempts to call me in her own utterance and tell me that she indeed knows who I am. A short string of enunciation lights her eyes in the sweetness of our own shared language. Mama. Sometimes I wonder what Jesus called Mary, the woman who cradled her hands behind his neck as she fed him of her own body, who rocked and swayed and hummed during interminable nights that slip out of the view of the infancy narratives. She who responded to his screams and his giggles, who tickled his belly and admired the tininess of his toes, who could discern the nuance of the needs from the chord progression of his cries. What lullabies did she sing? For of course we know that she sang. Jesus kicked her ribs and pressed his body against her organs as he stretched his limbs and expanded his lungs, rolling in the sacred baptismal of amniotic fluid. Her body drenched his need for eye thirst, allowed him to take and eat nourishment from the umbilical cord that supplied the cells forming and weaving together their holy tapestry from the creases and folds of her life. Scripture records that Jesus referred to God with affection, Abba, Father. Scripture only records that Jesus referred to his mother as woman. The absence of intimacy often feels conspicuous and peculiar to me, but perhaps instead should intimate that there are simply some relations that can never be made legible in writing. How many miracles are overlooked because they are simply taken as mundane? Because before the Christ we know cried Abba, surely he cooed Ima. And when his life ended, as he breathed his last, he looked for her. Mama. George Floyd enunciated his own murder before a crowd of witnesses who could not intervene without themselves possibly being killed. Floyd's murderer's badge and gun flashed toward the camera recording, his knee impinged on Floyd's neck, crushing soul and windpipe in suspended eternity. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. How often it seems the author of time scribbles long form in the genre of horror. There are no containers here large enough to collect the liters of Black blood crying out from the sidewalks and soil of this country, built with blood at the root and blood on the leaves. We watch George Floyd as he pushes oxygen through tracheal obstruction to call out for his mother, to summon her, like a prophet desperate for ancestral strength, astral intervention, or holy reckoning. And in the weeks to come, the banner of his gruesome death will lead a cloud of witnesses closer to the world that he deserved. How often it is that the violence of this world demands us be subsumed by how people have died instead of how they have lived. So much in Christian thought centers on crucifixion as the height of the theological narrative, a suffering often deemed necessary to salvation and thus a marker of redemption wholesale, as opposed to a pointing to the absurdities and harms that emerge when we assume that thirsting for blood and power are equivocal to thirsting for righteousness. Perhaps the images of the suffering Christ proliferate because this is the violence we know. This is the violence we expect, and this is the violence we've been informed to endure and accept. For often we who have experienced pain and suffering do, in fact, at the least, simply wish to be seen or remembered, which must very cautiously be considered with the dangerous corollary, what we will do to ensure our wishes to be safe. Should not our theology, though, inform our assessments of threat? Every day, it seems that we are walking ever more closely to the precipice of the end. The collapsing of governments and capitals and currencies, wars and rumors of wars and genocides and ethnic cleansings and displacements and diseases and, God forbid, climate change and political carpet bombing and coups. We are swallowed by catastrophe. Even to dare to grasp the rosary, to feel the smooth cool of beads between palms, gives way to the crushing weight of this world. The remaining shards splitting open, slivers of wound upon wound, violence upon violence, memorial flowers kissed by fresh blood, the words of prayer unspeakable through the asphyxiation of human dignity. Hail Mary, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of death. In times like these, it seems there are perhaps more than we actually recognize or realize who sit in vigil with Mary at the cross. In some of the earlier chapters of Immaculate Conceptions, I meditate on the womb imaginary of Black life, the configurations of Black birth and Black mothering in the American, by which I imply both the United States and the multiple hemispheric locations that go by this name, our social landscape, and think about the theological glosses of what we can and cannot do in service of reproduction. There, I consider the ways that divine motherhood is distanced from lived mothering and question how certain kinds of bodies are conscribed when purity, as a notion, functions as a colonial, patriarchal, and perhaps white nationalist or white supremacist ideal. And I consider the ways we are called to walk with the Mater Dolorosa, how a particular legibility emerges at the cross. So here in my work, this is one of the reasons I argue we must consider the Black Madonna. Consider that Mary's womb references, as well as is the place of Black life, as a site of theological resistance. In many ways, it would perhaps seem right and meet that Black theologians who have long proclaimed a Black Christ might thus also imagine Mary a Black mother, particularly given the proliferation of Black mothers whose children have been unjustly murdered at the hands of the state. And here I turn to the legacies of Mary's painless birth. The way that painless birth and those legacies are reminiscent of the ways that pain is misread or even ignored for and denied to Black women. Imagined as something fictive and other, something dramatic, as Black women are denied access to their own affect. I turn to the way the question relies for Mary on the suitability of pain as a kind of apposite response to the pronouncement of her grace. Mary's painless birth, when imagined, is imagined as a kind of freedom and overcoming, not only of the boundaries of the human body, but the spiritual ascension above the curse handed down to Eve. Pain is not something Mary deserves, and as such, she supersedes the conditions of labor. But for the Black woman, the mythology of strength is not one that offers dignity. The process of ungendering or masculinization denies Black women the capacity for pain to a different degree, one that denigrates their humanity and relegates their position as reprobate. Perhaps less like Mary and more like Rizpah, whose children King David kills for political strategy, Black women are left alone to configure their own efforts to, as Stephanie Buchanan Crowder has described, protect and secure her children, her dead children. She is a figure who, quote, shows the readers how mothers learn to literally dwell in death. Which perhaps moves us, albeit quickly, to the cross. Though the economy of Mary as mother of sorrows subsumes the entirety of her life as a mother, from the prophecy of Simeon to Mary proclaiming the sword piercing her heart, to her witness of the sword piercing her son's side, at the foot of the cross, Mary too embodies the pain and suffering of Jesus, compassionate, and thus the pain of the sins of the world. Mary, sole progenitor of the Word made flesh, somehow too stands only, to use Hortense Spiller's term, in the flesh, both mother and mother dispossessed. Somehow, while she is espoused as the paragon of the traditional symbolic of female gender, at its epitome and apex, she is actually a different social subject, even in her grief. So then what does it mean that the legibility of the Black mother, still unholy and still marked and excluded by pathology, is made ever slightly more legible when she stands at the foot of her cross? Here you see an image of Mary, Mother of Sorrows, juxtaposed with an image of Mamie Till at the side of her requested open casket of her son. And here we see an image of Leslie McSpadden, mother of Michael Brown, in Ferguson, Missouri. The inset is from Beyonce's Lemonade, wherein she featured the named Mothers of the Movement and a kind of photographic pietà. Sabrina Fulton, mother of Trayvon Martin, Leslie McSpadden again, Michael Brown's mother, and Gwen Carr, Eric Garner's mother. At the foot of the cross, Mary is transformed from an apolitical subject to a political one by her grief. But must actual women, actual Black women, and more specifically Black mothers in America only bear witness there? Is the testament of grief and the legacy and fulfilled prophecies of trauma forever the site of legibility, the site of theological attention, and thus the site, as mothers like Samaria Rice, mother of Tamir Rice, have articulated, the site of political leverage, abstracted phenomena, and intentional capitalist gain in the name of advocacy, support, and something feigned as justice? Here we are returned again to Saidiya Hartman's notion of the afterlives of slavery, the legacy of what Bell Hooks describes as imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, the legacies of what theologian Dolores Williams named as an issue of social and physical surrogacy, a theological legacy of refusal to see Black women as women, and even more so, the refusal to see Black women as mothers, instead seeing them as arbiters of threat and death. What then must we imagine theologically for the Black mother's suffering to also not be offered as redemptive, to not be placed as a critical nexus of legibility and a political project of empathy or even liberation, to not be an alternative modality to the surrogacy to which Dolores Williams warns us is so deeply beholden to Black bodies with wombs, to not be reduced to the kenotic constraints of paschal performativity. How do we hold space for the Black Madonna as Mater Dolorosa, a mother who weeps and moans, and as I argue, a mother who perhaps only wished to mother, not mother a movement? And do that without collapsing grief and trauma as primary register of legibility or mobilization. What warrants inclusion in this conversation? Are there different possibilities that can flow from the wounds of a pierced heart or elsewhere, from bursting umbilical cords, a leaking colostrum, from the site of the placenta, or even from one single perfectly formed tear? For indeed, my Madonna cries. As I said in this moment of the life of the world, and I'll have to say that planning a lecture months in advance, not knowing what all could possibly happen in the months between, at this point in the world is quite difficult. But at this moment, I've been thinking about grief. And I think about grief because I've been grieving. And I've been thinking about erasure. And I've been thinking about erasure because I feel like that's all I see. And I think about them as political acts and as theological acts. I want to share with you a story I actually more recently learned of the Cherokee Rose. I'll quote it here and do my best with pronunciation in honor of the Cherokee Nation. In the latter half of 1838, Cherokee people who had not voluntarily moved west earlier were forced to leave their homes in the east. The trail to the west was long and treacherous, and many were dying along the way. The people's hearts were heavy with sadness, and their tears mingled with the dust of the trail. The elders knew that the survival of the children depended upon the strength of the women. And one evening around the campfire, the elders called upon Heaven Dweller, Galaladi Gahi. They told him of the people's suffering and their tears. They were afraid their children would not survive to continue on and rebuild the Cherokee Nation. Galaladi Gahi spoke to them. To let you know how much I care, I will give you a sign. In the morning, tell the women to look back along the trail. Where their tears have fallen, I will cause to grow a plant that will have 7 leaves for the 7 clans of the Cherokee. Amidst the plant will be a delicate white rose with 5 petals. In the center of the blossom will be a pile of gold to remind the Cherokee of the white man's greed for the gold found on the Cherokee homeland. This plant will be sturdy and strong with stickers on all the stems. It will defy anything which tries to destroy it. The next morning, the elders took the women to look back down the trail. A plant was growing fast and covering the trail where they had walked. As the women watched, blossoms formed and slowly opened. They, for a moment, forgot their sadness. Like the plant, the women began to feel strong and beautiful. As the plant protected its blossoms, they knew they would have the courage and determination to protect their children, who would begin a new nation in the West. Now that I live in Georgia, I have been stunned by the Cherokee Rose. In random ravines, alongside highways, with each blossom blooming singly along a lateral branch. Apparently, the Cherokee Rose became Georgia's official state floral emblem by virtue of a joint resolution of the General Assembly approved by Governor Nathaniel Harris on August 18, 1916. The Cherokee Rose was selected as state flower in 1813 on what is now known as the Trail of Tears. The white petals, again, representing the clans of the Cherokee, the yellow center representing the gold for which the land was stolen. The Cherokee Rose still grows along the route the Cherokees followed westward into Oklahoma Territory. In March 2026, the Georgia Senate passed a bill, SB 518, to replace the Cherokee Rose as the state flower. Drivers of the bill intend to adopt the native sweet babe magnolia, Magnolia virginiana. The magnolia is one of the Virginian state flowers, as the state flower instead. The official word is that this move here, now, 110 years later, in this government administration, this move is simply driven by the fact that the Cherokee Rose is not native, and also because the plant is considered an invasive pest. Again, it is not native to the region. As I said, I've been thinking a lot about grief and erasure, and both as political acts and as theological acts. And I can't help but think of how many roses, rosaries, mothers, children, humans, and tears we find ways to justify erasing. The Cherokee Rose is non-native. The irony. For me, then, to consider any future that we might have left, especially for a theological imagination that has been ransomed, devoured, consumed by a vision of Christ that names a white, maniacal, warmongering, evangelical, Christological vision of violence and subjugation as heir apparent to a modern manifest destiny and vision of the world, requires many things. Only one among those, seeing Black women as sacred figures, and accounting for how we have or have not been delimited by a theology of Mary that has not taken seriously her capacity for Blacknesses, real and ontological and diasporic and shared. We cannot comprehend her tears. Black Mariology then proposes pilgrimage with the Black Madonna, not to the Black Madonna, with the Black Madonna, one that considers Marian thought beyond many of the normative claims to whiteness that masquerade themselves as finitely Christian, and instead expands the imaginary of Black life-giving as incarnational ethic. My conception emphatically plays on the theological and legislative doctrines that emerged in the Virginia colonies in the 1600s of partus sequitur ventrum, the declaration that a Black child born into the world took on the status of their mother to determine if they were enslaved or free, the blessing or curse of one's matrilineal lineage. A legality that not only encouraged the sexual exploitation of Black women, but attempted to curtail the imagination of Black futures and of Black life. I'm not interested in simply adding race to the recipes of doctrine and dogma, but instead collating what world it is we've been born into, never of our own choosing, and asking what we can actively labor to pursue. What dreams can we still hear breathing at the rim of the world? I argue that whether framed through negation, pathology, or crisis, all of these different ways, Black mothering has functioned in this country as a barometer for the ecology of Black life and death, amidst anti-Blackness executed through the history of Christianity. Black Mariology then considers our consideration of a theology arising from the condition of the Black mother, a theology following the condition of the Black Madonna, a theology for the consideration for all those who would pursue justice or life at the spiritual intersections of the world. I want us to question the legislative doctrine around our perceptions of Mary as signposts to our freedom, to retrace lost cartographies of possibility, to consider still that another theology is perhaps possible, even over the unseen precipice. But what I know to be true is this: I will not have any reservoir of creativity, imagination, resolve, or fortitude if all of my energy is usurped by those who do evil in this world, if my attentions are so entangled in vengeance and death that I no longer have space to build, that I do not have space to breathe, that I do not have space to birth, and if I do not have space to grieve. If we only discipline our attentions to death, how will our hope yet survive? Shall we remember that while we are birthed into a world we did not choose, we are still birthed. Each cell and synapse immaculate, miraculous, begotten, and made. Drenched with wonder, the density of wisdom, we are ever perched on the brink of the ineffable, and we are ever perched on the brink of the possible. We mark birth and death with time, of course, but this is only the most meager of measures. Each second, in actuality, a new start, a new end, a now and not yet. These intermittent attentions we come to take for granted. So too our origin stories. How is it that we have become non-native to ourselves? The stories that stitch together our worlds and our wounds, our lives, our being. They do not begin with us. They do not end with us. No, we are ancestral in the truths that rip us apart at the seams. And the theological stops and starts of holiness and desire, the interrogations of life and possibility, the inbreaking of fabric and flesh with new freedoms, the enunciations of sorrows unending, survived yet by unspeakable joys. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. For he has looked with favor on the lowly state of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. Indeed, his mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has come to the aid of his child Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." Please take a moment and listen with me.
We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mother sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Sing it with me if you like it. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. 'Cause to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light, I say, carry us through the gales. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Then struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. How about yeah. We here believe in freedom and not rich content. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine.
There is so much that can be said about the Magnificat, Mary's song, and its lineage in the prophetic songs of women throughout Scripture. But amidst our tears, and in a season of resurrection as a commitment to life, in a season of resurrection that the news tells us is still Lent, I remember here now as we who believe in freedom. For if there is a political theology of Mary, it's here, with the clarity of resistance to structures of domination that would stop and impede life. We do not have many words of Mary, but what we do have includes her song, filled with profound thanksgiving, filled with profound refusal for the world as it is. Mary sings a song not just for herself, but as one who carries with and within her the voices of her people. She will yet praise, she will yet rejoice, that there is still somewhere good news. She is presented as the servant of the Lord, though Mitzi Smith's recent scholarship requires us seriously contend with the possibility that Mary, doula, was indeed enslaved, and following the condition of the mother, the source of Jesus's experiences, as for Smith, enslaved and manumitted, that will ground his life as abolitionist Messiah. It's an important consideration, one that would only emphasize the revolutionary perspective of her poetic frame, for a song too easily relegated to hymnody of praise or devotion. For Mary does not stop here. Instead, her exaltation is the gate through which she lays claim to a series of divine reversals, divine refusals, of the realities of justice and oppression in the world, certainly as if ordained by God. The Magnificat becomes an invocation for any, as Pope John Paul II proclaimed, any who do not passively accept the adverse circumstances of personal and social life and are not victims of alienation, as they say today, but who with her proclaim that God raises up the lowly, and if necessary, overthrows the powerful from their thrones. From Mary's great pleasure, this song offers enthrallment of joy that perhaps, in the words of many African-American Christians who have exhorted this for some time, a joy that the world didn't give, a joy that the world can't take away, within which we also find the commitment to liberation that is at the heart of what it means to ascend to God's plan. Here we have a Mary willing to stand in the tradition of those who proclaim and demand justice with freedom on their minds. It is not a paradox to rejoice and to grieve, to inhabit the complexities of a world that will try to quiet both. Here we might be returned to Audre Lorde's work on the erotic imaginary, as it impresses upon us in an ethical demand. In touch with the erotic, I become less willing to accept powerlessness or those other supplied states of being which are not native to me, such as resignation, despair, self-effacement, depression, self-denial, end quote. Mary's Magnificat embodies the uses of the erotic as power. We see this as Mary's song progresses into the fullest capacities and pronouncements. Mary's scriptural yes, her fiat, to let it be unto me, is cited along with God and Mary's taking up of God's explicit no. As Gabar and Bingamer write, starting now, God begins to register a resounding no to any kind of sin that impedes or blocks the kingdom of justice and freedom from arriving. God's no resounds powerfully over the pride of the haughty, the ambition of the powerful, and the stuffed bellies of the rich. This is for the church, lowercase c, an indictment. For if the church earnestly compares itself with the person and figure of Mary, such reflection will entail examining and discerning whether it has truly said yes and whether or not it has the courage to say no at the right time. M. Sean Copeland speaks of resurrection hope in the language of healing, memory, and song. Kelly Brown Douglas has an entire book called Resurrection Hope, dedicated to laughter, memory, and song. Turning to Mary's song is turning to Mary's spiritual, and turning to Mary's spiritual should subtend our solidarities. For if solidarity is not the hope of resurrection, that no matter where we make our bed, God has promised to be there with us, even until the end of the age, that God loves us more than we can fathom, desires us, would come to show us God's self and save us, then I'm not sure of what life we can yet live into. If we have considered the Black Madonna with a womb that expands the capacity for being and passioned with the fire and flame of this world without being consumed by it, then we must consider a Black Madonna who sings in the key of, as my dear friend Andrew Prevost describes, doxological blackness, her song, the breakbeat of protest, which requires us to also consider abolition as the grounds for Christ's origin stories, for freedom to be wrought even in the womb. For one might consider, what if it was Mary who taught her son the songs of freedom? We end, which is to say, we begin again with Mary's freedom dreams. To contend that the womb is not a grave, to take the womb instead, as Harriet Jacobs described, as a loophole of retreat, a respite from the configurations of what seemed impossible, and the creative kinship and commitments toward freedom, even when one must yet endure fugitive life. We need a Mary who has had as much capacity to laugh as she was made to weep, a Mary whose body was used to dance as much as it was made to mourn, a Mary of resistant joy as much of a Mary of sorrows, as much as a Mary of consolation, as much of a Mary who refuses, a Mary who sweats and tarries and groans, who bleeds and wrinkles and aches, who delights and celebrates and luxuriates, not because suffering is requisite to knowing joy, but because the human conditions of suffering are marked by the human capacity to resist it, or at least resist it as a totalizing eclipse of all that we are. A Mary who leads with the reminders that advocacy and access, community and support can still find ways to remain verdant, that it is not our only job to attend to destruction, that our joy and grief can and should be met with rage, that even yet we can follow the condition of the mother with tears and sweat and song and screams, hopelessness and dreams, still to the one who is the way of life. For this, we must make a commitment to sacrament over the sacrilege of squander. For this, we must know that my Madonna cries. Tears of sorrow, of grief, of lament, of relief, of joy. Crick, crack. Are there any who have ears to hear? My Madonna cries, yet somehow also my Madonna sings. And I'm left to wonder, does yours? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very inspiring and challenging. I have a question, a couple of comments. So I read a book last year called The Bond, and it was written by a descendant of people that lived in the Mississippi Delta where Emmett Till was killed, and he's a journalist. And it was a riveting story, and he really unpacked like the systemic as well as the individual evil, and led to a murder of a child for nothing, really, right? And he unpacked it, but there was a hero in the story. And there was a young black man that knew Emmett Till, even though he lived in the Mississippi Delta. And he saw Emmett Till on the truck as they were transporting him to the bond. And he insisted on testifying. And they told him, no, don't, they're gonna kill you. And they tried, and he did it anyway. He testified, and then they got him the heck out of there, and he moved to Chicago, and he lived a long life, right? So my question is, if we appeal to the Black Madonna, right? Like, his courage is amazing to me, right? And stepping up in the midst of such evil. But is that enough for me to know that? Like, so for me, I give money to causes, and I vote the right way, and I try to, like, tell people not to be, like, homophobic or racist, but that's the extent of it for me, right? And so I guess what I'm asking you is, knowing that that fella did that, like, what would the Black Madonna say about that? And then also for me, like, how, other than just being a bystander, knowing about it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. I don't know what the Black Madonna would say. Just gonna put that out there. That's where my theological expertise. No, but I do have an inclination of the ways that any mother might appreciate someone witnessing to their children and to their dead children. And I think that in this moment where we are all under massive surveillance, where our computers and phones, it's not paranoid to say they're watching and listening to us all now, so you might as well consent to recording. But in this moment where we are being cultivated inside of a moral logic of fear. Don't say anything, you'll get in trouble. Turn off your phone so you don't get pulled aside out of line. Act like this is normal. Act like it's okay. Go on with your everyday life. To hear the witness of someone who's willing to say, no, whatever is happening, I'm going to tell the truth. And in this moment of erasure, or moments of erasure, maybe legacy of erasure, to say, I'm going to have this truth on record, even if I don't see it vindicated for myself. Telling the truth is enough. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so for me, if there are two answers, or two, I guess, places of resonance. The first is to ask, what am I cultivating in my life? What am I paying attention to? Are we able to cultivate lives of care for one another? I mean, we've got Christians getting rich off of books that say empathy is toxic. Oh, Christians care too much. What? You know, we got folks cussing out the Pope. I'm a better Catholic than you, sir. I mean, I'm just, just citing facts. We're among thinking friends. So one, the thing is that when it comes for your neighbor, it comes for you. And so the question is, what are you cultivating? How? And those in your life, what conversations are you having? You know, if you have children, what are you teaching them? Where are they going to school? Like, how are we actually talking about all of the things and not just existing in a bubble? But two, it's not just about cultivating, it's who are you doing it with? Who are you in community with? The reason I like turning and appreciate turning to song is that we don't sing alone. We join our voices, we have hands, we have feet, we have beats, we can rock, we can sway. It's an embodied reality that marks our resistance. Some of the most powerful collective resistance and protest have been all of these resistance choirs that have joined and gathered and intervened in moments where ICE agents are descending upon someone, and we've seen the deaths. Everyone's children are at stake. And so to me, it's to begin to speak, to act to each other. There's not, I wish that there was a bullet point list. I'm very type A. I wish that there was a bullet point list of like just things we can do. But it's also very clear to me that cultivating community is going to take more than calling our representatives. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, we have a couple of questions from the online audience. I'm going to mix the order up here a little bit just for what I think is going to make sense. This first question asks if Mary's song, the Magnificat, is essentially a song of protest demanding the powerful be brought down and the lowly lifted up. Why does the church so rarely treat it that way? And maybe a good follow-up on that is asking, are you aware of any particular musical versions that you think help to highlight that radical nature of Mary's song?
Whoever asked that question, thank you. So, this is a little cringy for me. I talk about why I think Mary has been suppressed historically. And I actually come from a Protestant tradition who is a set of Protestant traditions who, because of Council Trent, blah, blah, blah. All right, but they're happy to say, oh, you had a baby? Thanks so much. We'll take it from here. Appreciate you. And I even describe him, we just roll Mary out, like for the Christmas nativity scene, just, all right, we love a cute kid, dressed in somebody's blue robe. And then we put her back in the closet. And I don't think that we treat Mary any differently in terms of her radicality, in terms of her bravery, in terms of her courage. I don't actually think we treat her all that differently from Christ. And I don't think we actually treat her all that differently from any of the legacy of our folks who have been radical, folks who have resisted, folks who have told the truth about the world that we live in. I mean, you can't even mention Martin Luther King Jr. now. It's just so whitewashed, sanitized. You would just think that, he never did anything except walk around. He died. He was murdered. And not just because he was talking about water fountains. He was talking about war. He was talking about economic injustice. There are all sorts of things that we just lose. And I think it's because it's easier to encounter a photograph or build a statue than actually sacrifice anything in your own life for the greater good. In terms of songs, no. I teach a class called Mary in the Christian Tradition, and the students have done these wonderful Marian reflections and Marian chapels as their final project, just incredible stuff. And there's so much Ave Maria, and there's a long story to that too. But they were looking for songs too. And I, even in this presentation, was looking, and I'm Googling everything I can. Don't prompt the AI. But we could, but don't. But certain things you can Google. But where's the gospel version of the Magnificat? Where's the version with some drums or I'm looking, and so I think that this speaks to how unfortunately shrunken so much of our imaginations have become. It's really hard to ask questions theologically. It's really hard for a lot of folks to challenge, aspects of tradition or to intervene in different kinds of ways. But there's also so much possibility to take something and run with it and see where the Holy Spirit leads. So if you find one, please find me. Amey.Atkins@emory.edu.
Okay, the person who posted that question did mention something, the Canticle of the Turning. I don't know if that is the lead on that, but our last question here online is, somebody says, I'd like to bring more Black Mariology into my life. And are there books, prayers, images that you resonate with for that?
Yes, I wrote one. But for me, there's a lot to be said. One, I want to be clear, and I lay this out in the book, that the Combahee River Collective talks about Black women's freedom. But they also are very clear that if Black women were free, everybody would have to be free, because that would require the overturning and downfall of all of these systems of oppression. And when I speak in my book, Mary, I'm not saying Mary is just Black or only Black. I'm saying that we have to have a much more expansive idea. Like in the legacy of Matthew 25, I don't want to one day meet Mary and be told, oh, like I met you several times and you looked right by me. You bombed me and my kid. So when we're thinking about these things, one, I think that we have to attend to the stories that we have. I talk about Black Madonnas and Black Madonnas that exist in the context of mostly European spaces. They're often said, oh, it's smoke damage that they're Black. It's, paint oxidation that they're Black. Oh, they just got copied. Oh, it's wood. It's Black. I know, okay. But, those kind of like scientific explanations still have not refuted their Blackness, right? Nobody's copying a Black Madonna as a non-Black Madonna. And I turn to those because, we love an Orthodox tradition, not the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, which has so many miracles of Mary and all of these Black Madonnas that we just say, oh, they're doing that over there. But there's something to be said about the unorthodox erupting inside of what is considered Orthodox. And all of these there are Black Madonnas all over the world that we should pay attention to. But I think the fact that Black Madonnas exist in Europe are very important for our imagination. My question in the book is, what happens that these Black Madonnas have all of these miracles and all of they cry, they heal, they do all of these things, millions of pilgrimage, followers, ways that have pushed the church to create dogma, from popular piety. And yet their holiness and sacredness doesn't translate to people who have Black skin. We've lost something in colonization and in enslavement and in all of the ways we've tried to theologically justify that there is an ordo salutis that requires Black and brown and indigenous folks be at the bottom in service to those at the top. So for me, there's a lot inside of tradition that we can recover and reimagine, and that gives us fuel for resistance. And there's also the ongoing creativity of so many who have asked and seen and envisioned Mary as someone who wants to see us free. I would argue that's why you're not going to show up at a protest with anybody and not see Mary there. Somebody has painted a Madonna, somebody has created a Madonna. Mary will be there. And I think that there is a theological reason we turn to her and the reason that she shows up. Because maybe Mary didn't actually really want any of this. I want to put the humanity back in Mary. And the reason I want to do so is because we have a theological, anthropological example, right? We can look to Jesus, but I'm not fully human and fully divine. But we have someone in our tradition who we haven't really paid attention to, who is fully human and called to carry divinity within her. If we turn to her life as an example, then one, we too can begin to see Mary in all sorts of folks. See Mary around the corner. And then we begin to ask some different kinds of questions about what it means to live a faithful life and what we are actually called to do to follow Christ. That being said, there's more than a couple. There's several resources and I think books on Mary that are really helpful. Not necessarily in, there are several authors, womanist theologians who mention and make some conversations around Mary. But a book that's coming out that I'm really excited about, we didn't know that this was happening or we were both working on this, but Karen Baker Fletcher has a book coming out this summer that is on Mamie Till Mobley and the Black Madonna and the Foot of the Cross. And so I'm really looking forward to that as another set of explorations as well.
I don't have a question, but this will keep me up at night if I don't say something about the song. So in response to Black Catholic composer Leon Roberts has an arrangement of the Magnificat called Mary's Canticle. And so if you wanted to look into that, I think the people online can hear me too. So Leon Roberts.
Leon Roberts?
Yes.
Mary's Canticle.
Mary's Canticle. Thank you.
I need Leon to put that in the blurb on Spotify.
Other questions or comments? Okay, well, please join me in thanking Dr. Adkins-Jones. Thank you.